Well, we've been hearing this week that World War III has been put to an end. Now, whilst everyone hopes and prays this is the case, multiple indicators seem to suggest otherwise. President Donald Trump has attended his first NATO summit since taking office earlier this year. Zero Hedge reports a number of items that come out of the NATO summit, including Trump threatening to make Spain pay over NATO defense spending holdout, NATO members agreeing to significantly boost defense spending. But the part that is largely underreported comes later in the article. NATO chief Mark Rutte has, of course, identified Russia as NATO's most significant and direct threat and reiterated full support for Ukraine despite Washington having named China as America's top-pacing threat, and long-term main military and economic rival. Of course, the alliance has already funneled hundreds of billions of dollars into a conflict with Russia that has resulted in hundreds of thousands of lives on both sides, and all the while Ukraine losing about 20% of its territory. NATO leaders as of Wednesday have vowed to keep pursuing Ukraine's path to membership, with Rutte emphasizing that the question of accession was never ruled out, especially not before the war. Quote, "There is an irreversible path for Ukraine to join NATO, and that remains true today and will still be true after the summit," he said. So why does it matter that NATO reaffirmed its commitment to see Ukraine join NATO, and why does it matter that we got no pushback to this? Let us take you back to an article from 2022 where Putin reminded everyone that Ukraine joining NATO could lead to nuclear war. This is from thebulletin.org. On February 8th, in a jarring answer to a question from the media, Russian President Vladimir Putin said allowing Ukraine to join NATO would increase the prospects of a Russia-NATO conflict that could turn nuclear. Putin's assertion, made in the context of a complicated hypothetical about an unlikely Ukrainian attempt to take Crimea back from Russia, came during a joint press conference with the president of France, Macron. And then they say, well, they quote Putin here, "There will be no winners," describing a hypothetical future in which Ukraine had joined NATO and then attempted to invade Russian-occupied Crimea. He said, "And you will find yourself drawn into this conflict against your will. You will be fulfilling Article 5 in a heartbeat, even before you know it." Article 5, of course, of NATO's founding treaty says that any attack on a NATO member is an attack on all members. This principle of collective defense, NATO says, is at the heart of its treaty. The only time the article has been invoked was on September 11, 2001, when terrorists attacked the United States. And by the way, it would appear that NATO members seem to know this too. This in just yesterday from The Telegraph, British jets to carry nuclear warheads. It says British fighter jets are to carry nuclear warheads for the first time since the Cold War era after a deal with the US. It was written before the summit took place, of course, so it's in past tense. At a NATO summit in The Hague on Wednesday, the Prime Minister will announce that Britain will buy 12 F-35A fighter planes. Unlike the F-35B jets the UK currently possesses, they can carry nuclear weapons. We also have Sky News yesterday reporting that the UK must actively prepare for potential of war in the homeland. The National Security Strategy, published today, meaning yesterday, states the UK must prepare for the potential of a, quote, wartime scenario in the UK homeland for the first time in many years. This, of course, follows multiple nations floating that drafts need to be reinstated. That list includes Germany, the UK, Australia, France, and others. So all signs point to continued unrest and governments continuing to prepare for a world war. And then we have President Tracksuit, the president of Ukraine, not a NATO member, in attendance, finally donning a coat and pants instead of his usual gym attire. But what was he doing there? Trump being probably the only one against this conflict in Ukraine, with almost all other NATO members looking to fight until the last soldier and throwing endless amounts of money at that effort also. It really begs the question, what will eventuate with this conflict? It should have been over long ago. But seriously, what was Zelenskyy doing there? He is not a member, and we know that Ukrainian NATO membership should be completely off the table, considering it would immediately spark World War III and/or a greater conflict at minimum, given President Putin has made this clear. It's clear that many of the warmongers in attendance still have plans regarding prolonging or escalating this conflict. So let's hope, for the sake of everybody involved, that Trump is able to broker some peace, because it doesn't look like anyone else in NATO is interested in that outcome.